Hey there and welcome. So you're stepping into a new environmental compliance role. First off, congratulations. But let's be honest, staring down that absolute mountain of federal regulations can feel, well, incredibly overwhelming. You're suddenly looking at these massive, dense legal texts dictating exactly how your facility needs to operate, and just figuring out where to start is half the battle. Well, don't stress, because today we're going to translate those highly technical federal air quality standards into a really clear, actionable roadmap. Think of this as your quick start guide to understanding the rules that keep our air clean and keep your facility on the right side of the law. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's kick things off with a little bit of a puzzle. What do asbestos demolition, firing off rocket motors, and manufacturing glass all have in common? I know, on the surface they seem completely unrelated, right? One's a construction hazard, one's literal rocket science, and the other is just making everyday materials. But in the eyes of federal environmental regulations, they share a very serious connection. They all produce invisible, highly toxic byproducts that pose a massive threat to human health if they get released into the air. We aren't just talking about your standard exhaust fumes here. These are specific, dangerous pollutants that require strict, unwavering control.
To make sense of this intimidating legal framework, we've broken it down into 4 simple parts. First, the hazardous target list. Second, your core compliance duties. Third, federal versus state authority. And finally, the consequences of failing.
Starting right off with Section 1, the hazardous target list.
Before you can really do your job effectively, you have to understand the why behind it. Because in this role, you aren't just pushing paper around or checking boxes to keep bureaucrats happy. You're actually acting as a frontline guardian of public health. These regulations exist because certain industrial activities inherently create dangerous conditions, and your entire job is to make sure those dangers never reach your community. For example, specific industries produce specific unseen threats. If your company operates underground uranium mines, your main invisible enemy is radon gas. Running a primary copper smelter or a glass plant, you're going to be strictly monitored for inorganic arsenic emissions. And if your facility deals with coke byproduct recovery, which is something often used in steelmaking, your big concern is benzene. See, the federal rules don't just vaguely say, hey, don't pollute. They target precise chemical threats tied to the exact type of operation you're running. It really grounds all these abstract rules into a tangible reality for your specific facility.
And this brings us to a term you are definitely going to hear: fugitive emissions. It sounds a bit like a spy movie, right? But let's translate that regulatory jargon into plain English. When most of us think of factory pollution, we picture a giant smokestack billowing clouds into the sky. Well, those are controlled emissions. Fugitive emissions, on the other hand, are the sneaky ones. They're the unintended leaks just kind of seeping out of a loose valve, a faulty pump, or a cracked pipe fitting. As a compliance professional, you aren't just watching that main exhaust stack. Your job is tracking down and stopping these hidden invisible leaks across the entire footprint of your facility.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 2, your core compliance duties.
So now that we know what kinds of hazards we're dealing with, what do you actually have to do to keep the government satisfied and the public safe? Well, it essentially boils down to 3 core phases in your facility's life cycle. First, you have to apply for approval before you build or modify anything. Second, you notify the authorities when you're starting up your equipment. And third, you continuously monitor and record your emissions. Honestly, think of it like doing a major home renovation. You wouldn't just start knocking down walls and adding a brand new kitchen without getting a permit from the city first, right? And then, once construction is done, you have to pass inspections to actually use the space safely. Industrial compliance works the exact same way. You ask for permission before you build, you announce when you're turning the key, and you constantly prove you're operating within safe limits.
Now, a really crucial point here is understanding exactly what startup means legally. It sounds super simple, but it's a highly specific regulatory milestone. Startup is defined as the exact moment you turn on your facility's machinery or equipment for the very first time, for literally any reason whatsoever. It doesn't matter if you're just running a quick 5-minute test or calibrating a single machine. Actually, the moment that switch is flipped and the equipment comes to life, your facility is officially on the clock. Boom. You have strict deadlines from that exact second to notify the authorities that operations have begun.
Let's move right along to Section 3, federal versus state authority.
Okay, this is for sure one of the most common points of confusion for new hires. You're sitting there reading federal regulations, but who are you actually sending your paperwork to? Who is the boss that might just show up at your gate for a surprise inspection? To put it simply, there's a division of labor here. The federal EPA establishes the big, overarching national health standards. They do the massive scientific studies and write the master rules about what levels of toxins are safe.
But they usually don't want to micromanage every single factory in America, so they hand over the actual enforcement to your local state environmental agency. Your state agency is the one handling your day-to-day paperwork, issuing your local permits, and sending inspectors to physically walk your facility. Basically, the federal government writes the recipe, but the state government is the one tasting the soup to make sure you actually followed it.
And that brings us to our final section, Section 4, the consequences of failing.
We need to look at the practical what happens if scenarios, because this really highlights the ongoing, relentless responsibility of your role. Compliance is absolutely not a one-and-done task. It's a permanent state of operation. The biggest rule to remember is that compliance isn't just for perfect days when everything is running completely smoothly. The regulations explicitly require that you must always operate your equipment to minimize emissions, and yes, that includes during startups, planned shutdowns, or even totally unexpected malfunctions. You're expected to actively and continuously manage your facility to protect the air. You can't just throw your hands up and say, well, the machine was warming up, so that pollution doesn't really count. It always counts, and you are always responsible for keeping it as low as technically possible.
Now, regulators are realists. They know that in heavy industry stuff breaks. Malfunctions happen in the real world. What they care about is how you respond to them. When things go sideways, you are required to have a structured, proactive emergency response. You have to quickly identify exactly what piece of equipment failed. Then, you accurately predict how long the system will be down, and most importantly, you execute a predefined plan to fix the issue while containing any hazardous emissions. Failing to have a plan, or failing to follow it when a pipe bursts, well, that's exactly what leads to severe regulatory trouble.
Which brings us to a quick administrative reality check. Burn this number into your memory right now. 2. That is the absolute minimum number of years you must keep all your monitoring records securely on site. Every single pressure check, every leak detection report, every malfunction response plan, it all has to be filed and readily available for at least 2 years. If an inspector walks through your door and asks to see the emission logs from 18 months ago, you have to produce them right then and there. If you can't, you're looking at strict legal penalties. Because in the world of compliance, if it isn't documented, it literally didn't happen.
So as we wrap up, I really want you to think about this final question. Are you ready to be the guardian of public health in your community? It's so easy to view compliance as just a stressful series of legal hurdles. But when you master these rules, when you truly understand what to monitor, who to report to, and exactly how to react in an emergency, you aren't just avoiding fines for your boss. You are actively ensuring that the air your coworkers and your neighbors breathe remains safe and clean. You're an essential protector of your town. So with this new roadmap in hand, how are you going to take ownership of your facility's impact starting tomorrow?
If you found this helpful or want to stay updated when this regulation changes, subscribe and support the channel. And if you need the full technical details on this CFR, click the link in the description below. See you next time.